course, I'll do the old traditional, make sure it's coming through. Dun, 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 maybe. I hate this stupid delay. I'm just going to continue making that as long of a running joke. There it is. Going to continue making that as long of a running joke as humanly possible, where every podcast starts with me complaining about the delay.
Sure, yeah.
So, all right, cool. So we are back. I am. Kyle was on last week. I don't know if you want to do a second introduction. You can, but if not, I can do like a little sum up. It's up to you.
Sure, yeah. If you wanna hit everyone with a quick
Okay.
introduction,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
So Kyle is a language learner, obviously. Hence the point of my channel. Also, I'm not sure why my camera on your side has half of my face blacked out, but I have to use that good camera for YouTube. But anyway, Kyle is a fellow language learner. I met him via Esperanto. There's a whole podcast on that last week, and I wanted to bring him back because I wanted to do more than just an Esperanto-specific podcast. Kyle is someone I met in real life. Turns out he lived about 45 minutes away from me. We met via Esperanto, like I said, that's on last week's episode, and loves languages, yada yada. So that's pretty much it, and I have his link to his Twitter down below and all that stuff. So first and foremost, we already have a comment, so gonna go ahead and read that. Hello, thank you for this live video. I'd love to learn more about this language expert guest. All right, well, we will get into that. And
Certainly not an expert.
maybe so, man. And Big Perm says konbanwa, konbanwa. Konbanwa, actually, kanban would not be correct. But I wanted to bring it back on. Obviously, last week we had the episode involving Esperanto and touched all that. So let's talk post-Esperanto. I know we kind of got in a little bit of that, but let's start. If you guys, again, if you're new to here and you haven't seen last week's episode, you can follow up basically from start of language learning and mostly through the Esperanto with Kyle. Now we're going to cover post-Esperanto, which is basically about the last 2 years in terms of what he's been doing, and we'll kind of just go from there. So post-Esperanto, you get home from NASC 2018. Where do we go? What happens?
Yeah, so I guess just after NASC, I was still really motivated. And I'm getting some weird feedback. I'm not sure if that's your end or my end.
I don't hear anything right
You don't
off.
hear anything?
Uh-uh.
Okay. Okay. If we don't get any comments, it may just be something on my end. But as long as everyone can hear me, that's all that
Yeah.
matters. So yeah, so after I get home from NASC, I'm still headfirst in Esperanto, reading a ton of the original works of Zamenhof and some of the other really important authors in the language. Over the next couple of weeks and months, I sort of just sort of fall out of the language and don't really use it much. My usage on the internet and just my sort of self study and self practice just gradually sort of declines. And like I said, there were a few I guess bad eggs like every sort of community has that just sort of turned me off of it and made participating in it almost feel like a chore, and that I felt like everything I said was being almost scrutinized
Yeah.
sometimes. For better or for worse, I know that some people do it try to be helpful, and some people do it just because they don't have anything else better to do.
Yeah.
Um, but for whatever reason, it felt like oftentimes what I would say wasn't, I don't know, as it caused like almost controversy where I didn't want it to. So
Right.
got a little bit tired of some of that sort of stuff about behavior in Esperanto, and all of that is the internet anyways. So
Yeah.
it really that was the only way I was able to use Esperanto was through the internet, living at home. So for me, that was my one sort of link. And then when that became less exciting and less fun, my sort of use of the language just pretty much dropped off for a long time.
Right.
For at least the past 2 years, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Um, you know, Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead. If you were going to say something, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Recently I've been my girlfriend has shown a little bit of interest in it. We've chatted a couple short sentences here and there. She took a few lessons on the Duolingo Esperanto course, and so recently I've been sort of getting to see like the excitement, like how quickly you can pick up some primary like introductory sentences in the language. So that's
Mm.
been sort of my
Oh, so OBS reconnected. All right, it looks like that's live. Hold on. Yeah, it's like buffering really bad. Why is it buffering? Let me go to my actual YouTube channel and make sure what's going on here. Ba, 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 da, da. Hopefully nothing crazy is going on. My internet's been so terrible like since quarantine. I guess because like Comcast and the way cable internet runs, like it has like kind of a set amount per area, and I guess just from where more people are using it. I don't know, but it's been terrible. I'm gonna click on my video just to make sure
sure.
what's happening. Is it YouTube channel? Make sure what's going on. Let me mute that. I'm gonna mute that. That way nobody can hear it, and then I can periodically check back. Actually, you know what? I can. I think I'm gonna stay on this because I can see you on this. It's not on my thing. Like your video is still up, and that way I can keep a tabs on it and just make sure. Um. So, hold on. Are you still there? Did I mute
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
Okay, you're still
I'm
there.
here.
Okay. All right. I just have no idea now. Okay. So, yeah, dude. I lost that. All the technical difficulties there ruined my train of thought. Okay. So, yeah. So your girlfriend has interest in Esperanto, and she speaks Vietnamese, correct?
She does, yeah. Her parents were born in Vietnam, moved over here when they were fairly young, maybe late teens, and then her and her sisters were born and grew up here in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
So native English speakers and pretty much native Vietnamese speakers as well. They use it oftentimes as a family language. They do a lot of mixing Vietnamese and English together.
Right.
She also studied Mandarin in
Mm-hmm.
school, and has read a few things here and there to me, or said a couple words here and there to me in Mandarin, which
Mm-hmm.
is really great. So we share that sort of that interest in other languages, and
Right.
that feeling of excitement you get from learning languages as well.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. That's super good. Of course, and I know that that's what you are learning currently is Mandarin or Vietnamese.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah,
and so you are learning the Southern dialect.
that's right. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Southern dialect.
Okay. So you with Esperanto or with Vietnamese. Sorry, man. It's so, we had that huge chat on Esperanto, and it's so hard for me not to just say Esperanto by default now. Apparently.
Right. That's okay.
So with Vietnamese, and that's actually a good topic because I think anybody watching may or may not have had issues with learning a language that doesn't have as many resources. Vietnamese does not have as many resources, and even if they do have resources, they're not as well designed as some others, right? Like the Duolingo course is very kind of. Lingo Deer has a Vietnamese course, but all the other languages have two full sections that you can go through, and Vietnamese has one.
Right.
So, what's it been like learning? What has it been like learning Vietnamese? What have you been doing? Because, like I said, I know that the resources are very limited.
Sure, yeah. So I think I've only been learning Vietnamese on and off for, I guess we're going on about 5 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I think back in January I was studying really hard, and that was really, I think, probably when it picked up the most was January, as I sort of hit a peak.
Mm-hmm.
And I was using a lot of just sort of different places on the internet, trying to find any material that was covering the southern dialect of the language. And so when we talk about Vietnamese not having a ton of resources, add on to that most of the resources that are available are in the northern dialect, which is sort of like their standard dialect.
Right.
So no, you often hear people talking about like the Hanoi
Yeah.
publishing and things like that. So all of that is based around like how they speak and use the tones in the north.
Right.
So add on that there's not many resources to the fact that I need southern resources, and that even further limits it.
Yeah.
There are a few, I guess, applications or some programs, I guess platforms that do offer the Southern dialect. One of those is Glossica,
Hmm.
which I was really excited to use for about 2 months. Um, my problem with that was that it felt overwhelming after that amount of time. They presented so much to you up front that I felt I couldn't keep up with the
Yeah.
rate at which I was trying to learn new material.
Yeah.
And so what I loved about it was that the audio and the spoken language was really high quality.
Yeah.
You could tell that they've done a lot of work to get really high quality audio files, and then really great pronunciation on those files as well. For me, the format itself wasn't lending itself very well for my learning style, at least.
Yeah. I know that people would probably disagree with this because, again, everybody learns differently. I think where Glossica could stand out from everybody else if they really wanted to would be having sentences that. So, like, anybody who hasn't used Glossica, like, the first 5 sentences you learn will be like, my ear itches. The carpet is black. My car won't start, right? Like, the problem is none of it. Welcome to the stream, Soul. Thank you for joining, and also thank you, Matthias Costa, for joining. Thank you, guys. The problem is it's so many different new words. I think if Glossica, this is personal, and again, everybody learns differently, and I know people that would probably disagree with this. I think if Glossica approached it from a standpoint of introducing kind of a concept, like an idea, right? For example, my carpet is black, right?
Mhm.
Then extend that. My carpet is dirty. My carpet is clean.
Sure.
My carpet is pretty. So you've introduced these, but around the same idea of carpet. Then you can use those other words to go to car. My car is clean. And introduce it kind of in that 1 to 2 new words, preferably one, but 2 new words per sentence. I think that would make Glossica maybe top notch, one of the best platforms out there. Or if you could at least separate it in that regards.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, they know much more about language learning and the science behind it than I do.
Sure.
But I think that for my learning style, it's like you said, all of what you would learn in a day felt very disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess their idea is that over time you hear these things so many different ways. Maybe a word or two does change, but it might be a few weeks. And so since the last time you learned, I guess, a similar sentence,
Yeah.
and so you're doing thousands of these repetitions, and then eventually it sort of I've read reviews and people say eventually it just sort of clicks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get that. And I think that it could work given the time. But for me, it felt like I was getting almost like diminishing returns. I would put in more and more time. But it was almost like I kept having to go back and review what I had already heard.
Yeah.
So it just didn't feel to me like I was making much progress. And not to mention the prices is a little steep. I think I was
It's
paying upwards of like $25 a month.
yeah.
I think $25 to $30 a month, and I felt like that was just a little high for what I was getting out of it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure if you look on the website. Hold on, I'm actually gonna do this while we're streaming here since I got the stream up. I wonder if on there they say it fits in line with some sort of like, whether it be the CEFR or whatever. Like this is officially A1 personalized learning plan. See, I mean that's cool. I like that you can specifically target topics, but again, like I think the what users are saying, blah blah blah. Okay, it doesn't really say. I mean, I'm sure I could investigate that a little bit more, but like I wish that you could sort it. Kind of the idea of, whatever. The other thing that I find very strange is, and I know that again a lot of people wouldn't do this, but something that would be really really beneficial to me is if all the sentences on Glossica you could just set and have them play. And I know that the idea is, you learn, like they're trying to do the SRS thing, right? You
Mhm.
learn a sentence and then don't hear it for a day, and then you don't hear it for 2 days, and then you don't hear it for 4 days, and you don't hear it for 2 weeks, whatever. And I get that, but like, I don't know, man. Specifically for sentences, especially sentences with so much new material, like if it was a sentence with one new word, I would absolutely be fine with it. But again, since every new sentence, you know, I don't know. I feel like that could be really, really beneficial. Soul says that reminds me of Duolingo. Sometimes they teach words early on that will probably never be used in conversation for me, at least. Yeah, I can agree with that. I've learned uh, plenty of words that I've never used. I mean, like, I guess the idea of it is to teach you, specifically with Duolingo, is to teach you sentence structure. Like, that way you can't just plug and play, but it's still kind of useless words. Like the fact that you learn how to say crab before you learn how to say to throw or something of that nature, like some sort of verb, like motion, whatever, is kind of weird, but whatever. But yeah, so I know you used Glossica for like a few months because I know that you were getting up to like 2,000 or 3,000, if not more, of the reps that they call it.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So I would think I was approaching 3,000 reps when I stopped using it. And like I said, a lot of it had to do with I didn't feel like I was really getting my money's worth. A lot of the features that they had were great, though. You know, they would send you sort of like weekly updates about how much time you had spent learning the language, you know, how many reps you had gone through. They would like sort of break down how many times you had seen or listened to individual like sentences that they
Mm,
used. So a lot of it was very like I feel like quantitative base,
mm-hmm.
and it was you know very almost like scientific feeling,
Mm.
which is for me not usually how I approach language learning.
Yeah,
So it did sort of give me you know a little bit more of a here's the science behind it background of language learning, which was kind of cool.
yeah, yeah. Well, and really, if you're the one thing that I really thought, because I tried to use Glossica not too long ago for Chinese. I was using it for a little bit for Chinese, and what ultimately kind of even pushed me into this phase of going through trying to do mass immersion again, which I've stuck with for 21 days, which may be the longest I've ever stuck with anything in my life. But when I realized I was listening to so many sentences that had no context, and I didn't understand half of them. I was like, I could just immerse, and it would be the same effect, but I'm getting the visualization of what's happening, and maybe that can start to trigger some patterns and stuff within my brain.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's a good point, right? You know, we all have. I mean, I'm not gonna say all, but most people have access to Netflix, and it's you know what ten or $12 a month, and you can do the same thing. You know,
Yeah.
you have that native audio, you have the ability to make those repetitions if you want. You know, you can rewind and listen to a phrase as many times as you need to if you're listening, you know, to Japanese or to Spanish or whatever the language is
Yeah.
on Netflix. So in a way, you can sort of customize that experience to your own sort of interests.
Yeah. Also, fun fact, I went to my Netflix the other day. I'm about to maybe save you guys $3 a month. I went to my Netflix the other day. Um, my TV is a standard HD TV, like just 1080p. Well, when they released the Ultra AD or Ultra HD, all the like whatever. Well, when Netflix added Ultra HD movies, they automatically updated your account to play Ultra HD, which is $3 extra a month. So I actually just went in
Oh,
and I saw that and I was like, oh, whoa, what's happening now? And I downgraded it back to just standard high definition, which is saving me $3 a month. So a little cheat code for you guys. It's hard.
nice.
It's hard to find material with the I+1 method. It is strangely hard, and I don't understand that. Like the idea of just one new word per day. Like that's a very and I'm not even saying that. I liked that system. That's one thing I will say about again, like I find I do genuinely think that the Duolingo Esperanto course is the best. And I think it's because the people designing it knew that it had to be like top notch.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I think that they designed it perfectly because it actually, I thought it had a very good flow to it as well. Like, and there would be words, right? It didn't matter how different the topics were. If you covered politics and then sports right after each other, they found a way naturally to make the words overlap.
Mhm.
So yeah, but it's very weird to me that kind of the idea of like comprehensible input or whatever, which I have different opinions on comprehensible input because if you're trying to find comprehensible input, that means you already know the language, which means you're not learning with comprehensible input, because if you know it, it's comprehensible. So anyway, that's a whole different thing. I get the idea behind it. I think I look a little too far into it, but yeah, it's a very real thing. James Anthony says it's the legendary Buddy Kyle. Yes, sir, it is. It's the legend himself, Buddy Kyle. So you're in a perfect situation, right? You're in a situation where you have a relationship companion, your girlfriend, who speaks the language, and I know so many people would die for that, right? Like, be able to use it every single day. Does your girlfriend ever get like maybe irritated? Like, come on, like, all right, we don't need to constantly. I feel like I would be really bad. Like, if my wife, if Tracy spoke Japanese, I'd be like, or whatever, language it was, I'd be like, why are you speaking in English? What are you doing? Like, I feel like I would be very bad in that situation.
Sure. So I will say that I think it was yesterday that it was the first time that she had ever gotten a little irritated with it. So we can talk about what resources I'm using now, but
Yeah.
in a moment. But I had just finished a lesson. I was feeling, really good, and so she's a nurse, and so she wakes up in the evening time. So when I'm finishing work for the day, so I had finished up work. I made some dinner, did my Vietnamese lesson, and then was helping her get ready, waking her up for work, and was doing everything in Vietnamese. And so by the time we got out the door and I was walking her out to her car, she was like, "Okay, I can't focus on Vietnamese right now. I need you to speak English." And so that was the first time that had happened. But in a way, it felt good because like I was able to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do in Vietnamese with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talking about like what I ate for the day, what I had been doing, how work was, her leaving and stuff, and I was able to do like 70 to 75% of that in Vietnamese with her. So that
Yeah.
was kind of validating in a way.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. Yeah, so I'm really bad. I jump all around. Oh, hold on, here we go. Another. I know physical flashcards aren't cool anymore, but they're the most effective way for me to learn vocabulary. Why do you think this, Kyle? How are they different to digital flashcards?
Oh, okay. So someone, I guess, is looking at my Twitter because I think that's something that I tweeted maybe a couple months back. For me, it's more about I think the connection between like what I write and sort of my thoughts rather than like me pushing buttons to input something.
Right.
I just find that I can remember things much more quickly and more readily if I'm actually physically writing them rather than doing it on a screen.
Yeah, I can. The only thing that I have experience with that in Japanese, and I fully understand what you're saying because, I'm going through remember the kanji and all that stuff in Japanese, and I am remembering a lot, but there's a lot I'm not remembering. I've wrote
Mhm.
down 2 or 3 kanji, and I know them, and I've only wrote them once. And
Mhm.
it's not kanji I've come across and remember the kanji. This is stuff that I come. I think there is a kind of something that happens from the motion of writing, triggering it in your brain that can help it kind of stay. So I think even honestly, I have a friend, a buddy, if you will, my buddy Evan, my good friend Evan. He the way that he studies Japanese is he plays game, which he's proficient in Japanese, but he's had to get to that point, and this is what he's always done. He basically keeps a notebook on him, and if he's playing a video game and he sees a kanji he doesn't recognize, he pulls out his phone, he looks it up in Japanese, and he'll try to draw it out the best he can, which sometimes screws him over because a lot of these apps you have to have proper stroke order and all that nonsense. But so he'll do that, and he'll say, "Okay, this means this," and he'll write it down, and he'll try to even make up his own little story to how to remember it, like with what the different radicals mean. And if he comes across it again, he doesn't remember it, he does it completely brand new, and more often than not he doesn't have to do that because he's wrote it down, right? And he doesn't review his notes, he doesn't review anything, he literally just makes that one connection of writing. If he has to do it again though, the reason he makes up a new story is because the story he made up the first time clearly wasn't enough to make him remember it, and that's all he does.
Sure.
And he'll
Yeah.
just write something down, and I mean, you're talking thousands of kanji, so you're talking maybe 100 or so that he's had to do more than once. But in the grand scheme of kanji, that's a very low amount, just based
Sure.
on that hand. And again, that's not even for flashcards, not even to study again. It's literally just writing it down as he's going.
Yeah, I will say, more about writing, actually handwriting your notes. Um, I'm somewhat similar in that I never look back at my notes. I make notes during a lesson. I don't put any effort into making sure that I can read them again, or that they look good or whatever. For me, they really are just about like there's something between writing it down and instilling it into my brain better. I don't know what that is, but I did that all through college too. Even during classes that weren't about language learning, I would always take notes during classes, and
Hmm.
even if I never looked back at them, just writing it down, I could remember better.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think there's something. I'm sure there's some sort of study out there. I don't. I need to read more about some different studies in language learning and stuff. But I know personally for me, and I don't do it enough. But I know that the few things that I have wrote down has stayed in my brain a lot more. So speaking of flashcards and whatnot, because we jump around all over the place. Which again, if you're a fan of the channel or watch the channel, you know that that's kind of my style. I don't have any kind of rhyme or reason. It's just kind of whatever floats the boat here. But what is your actual study method now? Because I know are you not using Glossica anymore, right?
No, yeah. So I'm actually I'm not using any apps, no books, no textbooks either. I found a course through actually. So after your podcast with Lindy,
Mm-hmm.
she was talking about SVFF, which I think is Southern Vietnamese for foreigners.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew about it, but I only knew of it as a YouTube channel, and I had watched some of their videos and really liked them, but they weren't necessarily structured in any sort of way. They were almost like individual, like one-off lessons,
Mm-hmm.
or occasionally there would be like they have a playlist of like the top 100 most used Vietnamese words, and they
Gotcha.
broke it up into like a 10-part series. Um, so most of the time it was nothing that you could like go through like lesson one, lesson two, lesson three. Um, at least that's how I thought it was organized.
Mm-hmm.
I dug a little bit deeper and found their Facebook, and they had some more information there. And it turns out that they had created a course on uh, Udemy. It's like
Okay.
Academy, but with a U.
Yeah.
I guess it's pronounced Udemy. I'm not exactly sure what the platform is called, but they have a course there. And I found the day I found it, it was on sale. It was like $12.99, and I was like, okay, this looks pretty good. It's all native audio. There's video. The instructor has like a green screen behind him, so it looks really well done,
Mm-hmm.
nice quality. They do some role play, some like conversational things, and they like put you into a situation, and you have to like repeat after them, or then like give a response, almost kind of like a Pimsleur style
Yeah.
mini lesson. The lessons are about 30 minutes each. I'm
Perfect.
only on the fourth lesson, but so far I'm having a really good time with it. I think that there are maybe 10 lessons total in this introduction course. They labeled it as like beginner Vietnamese, like level A1.
Gotcha.
So I'm not sure exactly how many like Sepher levels they're planning on doing or have released already, but I'm certainly gonna get through this one, and I'm finding it really great so far.
Yeah, that sounds super super cool, man. I've noticed that there's a lot. I actually discovered Udemy, or again, however you say it, through a Mandarin Chinese channel called Smart Mandarin, um, and she has a course on. I think it's on that Udemy. No, hers might be that Teach Me. There's a ton. The point of that though, and piggybacking off of what you said, there's a lot of courses out there, and like I always felt like a long time ago that those were kind of scams,
Yeah,
but the more that I've looked into it, there's actually it's a very very reasonable way for people to be able to put their own stuff up there and not have to pay the overhead costs of website fees and I mean I know that you're paying for it, but like it's just a way for them to get up there. Plus, as those platforms have become more reliable now, if I saw smartmandarin.com and I'd never heard of it or whatever, or even if I'm sure if you saw svff.com and it was like pay us $20, like we're not talking like talk to me in Korean, right? Like talk to me in Korean is like hugely known, but like for these
right.
new ideas, like I'm not gonna put my card in and give this place $10 a month. But for a place like that, where they've become a little more reliable, it's definitely something worth checking into. Yeah, I'd be interested to see how many of the kind of the CFR levels they go to, because I'm sure in 10 lessons it's probably not total A1. It's probably just like get you, which Vietnamese, man, there's a lot of stuff to take in there. So
Yeah.
you're taking a whole lot of stuff. What do you think the most challenging part for you? And I know that tones would probably be the obvious answer, but what would you say if tones are the thing you struggle with the most? What is the second thing you struggle with the most?
About tones, this is the first language I've ever made any serious attempt to learn that has a tonal system. And so going into it, of course, I was like kind of terrified of them. One thing that really helps in Vietnamese, though, is that they use sort of a modified script that we use in English.
Right.
So, there are a lot of differences because they do mark the tones with like diacritics that we don't have. But for the most part, those really do the shape of them, the marks above the letters really sort of do indicate like what your voice is meant to be doing. If it's like a rising tone or a falling tone, or they all have like fancy names. I can't remember any of them.
For sure.
There's one with like a chapello, like
Yeah.
a hat, and Esperanto over
Yeah.
it. So there are a couple that really seem to like almost like tell you what sound your voice is going to be making during the pronunciation. So for me, the tones haven't been as bad as I anticipated them being.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I guess the most challenging part so far, like now that I feel like I have a good resource to use, at least for the time being, and hopefully, the quality of their lessons is really good and some of their advanced content too, because I would certainly pay, another 19.99 or 13.99, whatever the cost would be, as long as it's reasonable,
Yeah.
for like an intermediate course or something in the future.
Yeah.
So assuming that I can maintain that having good lessons and things, I think it's just learning vocab really, and I know that sounds
Gotcha.
kind of crazy, but the vocab is so different that
Yeah.
it's almost like I spend a lot of time learning European languages or studying them, taking interest in them, and so a lot of the vocabulary I can almost like pick up because it's a Romance language based vocabulary or
Right.
a Germanic based vocabulary, and it looks a little familiar. If it's not completely similar in some way to Esperanto or English.
Right.
So for me right now, just being able to uh, just maintain and to learn as much vocabulary as I can because the grammar isn't that bad either in Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what I say to my girlfriend is sort of jumbled up, but she's able to understand it because the grammar isn't so different from English that you can't just use like subject verb object grammar.
Right. Yeah, I know the grammar. Just the briefly when I studied it was very very similar in terms of what I had got to. Was very very similar, and I know that if I'm not mistaken, Vietnamese doesn't do verb conjugations, right?
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have
Um,
just like in Chinese, you have like you would say the verb, and then there's like a basically like an auxiliary verb that means did happen or whatever.
right. Right. Yeah. So I know a couple of those. So like I have words for like like it is happening now, or it did happen, or it will happen. So yeah, it's just a word in front of the verb, and there's your conjugations, which is
Yeah,
like crazy.
yeah, yeah. This is
Or
super
not
cool.
conjugations, but like tenses, I guess.
Yeah,
Verb tenses.
yeah, yeah. See, and that's what I like about. Even though I struggle because there are multiple ways to conjugate a Japanese verb into the same tense based on how formal you're being, I do like that there's not verb conjugations per pronoun.
Right.
That makes it tremendously easy. There are a couple of YouTube channels for Vietnamese that I watched a long time ago. One is it's a I think he changed the name of the channel. It used to be called Rusty Compass. And it was a dude living in I can't remember. I think he lived north though. Let me see if it still comes up. I think he did change his channel name. Rusty Compass. No, it's still Rusty Compass. Okay. Vietnam travel guide for people wanting. He does have like Vietnamese content on here in terms of like speaking and stuff. But yeah, he uploads some pretty cool stuff. And then there was another guy who, and all of his videos are in Vietnamese. What is his name? Dan something. Dan. Oh, what is this dude's name? Come on, dude. Sorry, this is like probably boring for people watching, but
No, I just wrote it down. It's helpful for me.
Dan Vietnamese Dan. What's like? Oh my god, dude. What is that dude? Dan Hauer, Hauer. Yeah, his channel is like fully in Vietnamese. My god, this dude has 1 million subscribers. He has
Oh wow.
exploded since I've watched him, which is super cool. Happy for the guy, I guess. But yeah, man, you know what? He hasn't uploaded in over a year, but there's still like he has 148 videos, and they're all in. From what I've seen, they're all in Vietnamese. So that's just some content for you, I guess, if you're interested. So,
Yeah, sure.
but that's one thing that I struggled with when I was trying to learn a little bit of Vietnamese was finding content. I did find some music. I had nothing that I could remember right off. I have a Vietnamese playlist on YouTube, which I can send you after. I think there's like 1 or 2 songs on there. There's not a lot, but like yeah, I struggled with like media from there because it didn't seem like there was a lot of like just TV and obviously there's news and stuff, but like TV, like
Sure.
just regular shows and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of run into that too. We often talk about like K-pop and J-pop.
Yeah.
It seems like V-pop is like becoming a thing, where it maybe like has been for the past couple of years.
Hmm.
Nothing that I'm like super into, but it's still like new music being produced and like sort of seeing that growth a lot. Like a lot of these Eastern Asian countries like have started to use like
Yeah.
um, especially in Korea and Japan, and so that's sort of an exciting prospect, at least, to be a little bit familiar with like that. I guess art form is developing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's always super good. Just because for that culture, like I mean, it was
Yeah,
just for them to have some stuff going on. Does your girlfriend and her family go to Vietnam? Like, do they travel there like frequently? Not frequently, like once a week, but you know what I mean. Like, do they go? They try to go like once a year, once every couple of years, or something like that.
yeah. I'm not exactly sure how often her parents visit. I know that she's been once or twice is all.
Well,
I think that a lot of their family is here in the States, either in Pennsylvania, or a lot of them are in California too.
okay,
And so a lot of them have immigrated to the United States. But I mean, at this point, a lot of them were born here. So
right,
it's almost like, the several generations now are here in the States. Of course, they do have, they still have a ton of family who live in Vietnam, but it's more like distant cousins and things.
gotcha, okay, yeah. I always want because like Vietnam is like a place like I want to first. I mean, I want to see Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, but I want to see like Ha Long Bay and like there's also a sweet little area like right in between of like that's like central Vietnam that
Yeah.
they have their own dialect too.
Yeah, yeah, they do. Yeah, I don't know if a lot of people know that. Maybe like fans of your channel probably do because they just like languages in general. But I know when I first started studying Vietnamese, I didn't realize that there was like, and it seems like maybe even like there might even be some like distinguishing like differences between like in certain parts of the north they speak one way, and then in certain parts of the south they speak it a different way. So like even within like the main three sort of dialects, there might be some like regional
Yeah,
differences, which is crazy because it's not a huge country.
no,
But I guess that like that divide between the north and the south during the war and things,
right.
really like creates a separation.
I'm gonna see how long it is uh from Hanoi to. I looked this up a long time ago. Hanoi to directions to Ho Chi Minh. Uh, wow. Okay. That's actually a lot longer than I thought it would be. And granted, this isn't totally tip top north to totally bottom south, but I mean, Hanoi is pretty much the epicenter of the north, and Ho Chi Minh. For anybody who's unfamiliar with Vietnam and the way that they're a very long country, but it takes to get from by car with no traffic 31 hours.
Huh. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I did
Didn't
not.
realize that.
I did not. I did, that kind of blows my mind. What is the mileage on this? Ah, it's in kilometers. Why is it in kilometers? I guess because it's in Vietnam. Let me do a. Let me do
It's
a.
because it's just outside of the United States.
Yeah. It was 1,612 kilometers. So anybody watching internationally, not in the other two countries that use the whatever system we use, metric system, whatever the crap it is, km to miles. I wish we would just jump on board with that, man. 1612. Wow, 1,001 miles. What?
Huh.
That's
Yeah, didn't realize that.
that's pretty crazy, man. I mean, I guess it is the entire of that kind of southern Asia. Like it is the entire coastline.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Of course, I mean, air miles would obviously be different. Like if you're talking about like what are they called? Nautical miles or bird miles?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but still, that's pretty. I'm gonna click on this flight here. What does that say? Um, it's a 2 hour flight. All right, so a 2 hour flight to put it in perspective for people in the United States. I flew from Atlanta to Houston, and it was right at 2 hours. So from Georgia to kind of the coast of Texas. I mean, that's a pretty long country.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And you know, it could be too that like there are all sorts of like weird things about this is not language related anymore, but there are all
Yeah.
sorts of like weird things about maps and like the way that they're like projected, I guess is what they call it.
Mm,
And that like some countries look like super small where they're like actually much larger.
right.
So like there's like distortion on the way that maps are laid out. And so like probably in the United States, like there's a much like bigger focus on making sure that like the US is the most like prominent looking thing on the map and
Right.
like small like countries that are further away like look maybe smaller. I don't know if that's like part of like why we don't think it's as long as it is.
I mean, if you look at China in comparison to the United States on Google Maps, China looks smaller.
Oh yeah.
I don't really know much about land masses, but it looks and Vietnam actually I mean it's not much shorter than China in terms of like across the country.
Mhm.
Very, very interesting. I'm gonna say one last thing about countries, and then we'll get back onto language learning. But I want to learn. I should have asked Lindy when she was on, since she's from South Africa. I want to learn more about Lesotho, that country that is in South Africa. Have you seen that? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
Like
I know nothing about it.
yeah, it's literally like, because normally countries border, but this country is like Lesotho, and then like South Africa is around it. Like it's just this like,
Right.
little blurb that's just like, nope, we're forming our own thing here.
Hmm.
But yeah, so all right, that went on. That's what I'm the king of, man. Random. So, what overall, like, what do you think? Oh, so is Vietnamese your main priority right now?
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely say that it is my like primary and pretty much only focus. I know that I had talked a little bit about like dabbling in some Latin because I saw that it was on Duolingo.
Hmm.
You know, what sort of inspired me to do that was actually our conversation. In that, you know, we mentioned that Esperanto would be a great sort of like in between language if you like you don't know which direction you're going
Yeah.
like for language learning and you're just looking for something you know to study in the meantime. You know, for me, like I picked up Latin and did that for a couple nights. And then like I was like, you know what? I'm kind of wasting my time. I recognize so many of these words because of my study of other languages. So like the lessons are way too easy. I'm
Hmm.
gonna get back into my Vietnamese like full time.
Yeah.
And so for me, like it was just like a little bit of inspiration to you know to move to another language for a bit and then pick back up with Vietnamese.
Yeah, that's cool, man. It's a language I definitely want to learn. I've talked many times about my absolute love of uh, honestly Vietnamese culture. May be my favorite. It may be my favorite language. So you're probably wondering why are you studying Japanese? But again, a lot of it has to do for me with resources, content,
Sure.
and stuff like that. One day down the road, I will learn it. I'm not counting when because God only knows how long I'll be on Japanese. In terms of if I stick with what I'm wanting to do, but I'm really like So what is your goal with Vietnamese in terms of uh just like what is your are you looking to reach like super high level, or are you just wanting to become more so conversational, and then you can just kind of be able to pick it up in conversation with your girlfriend or her family or whatever? So like what is kind of your, I mean, I guess it's hard to say what your end goal, because technically your end goal is probably to never stop learning, but like what kind of level are you shooting before you would jump into something else?
Sure. I mean, for me, like I went into this like not knowing anything about Vietnamese, the language, and really I wouldn't be learning it had I not like started dating a Vietnamese girl.
Hmm.
And so like, just getting to know her and like hearing it spoken like at her house with her family and things, like that was inspiration enough, like because I wanted to be around them and I liked them and like talking to them. And like I saw it as just like an opportunity to like connect with them on like not a deeper level, but like on a more like personal, I guess, sort of level. Like getting to understand their language and their culture was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, just important to me to like to get to know them, I guess. So that was one of the goals, I guess, and that was something that I mean, I feel like I have accomplished that already, through my study of the language. But I joke with her that like I want to be able to like talk about people while we're at restaurants, like so
Right.
that they don't understand what we're saying. And
Right.
she's all for that because that's just funny, and
Yeah.
we not in like a mean way, but sort of just like sarcastically.
Right.
We want to be able to do that. Um, and I also made sort of a jokey goal with her that this Thanksgiving I want to sit at the big kids table. So the joke this past Thanksgiving was that we were sitting at the table where everyone was like, we were the two oldest, and everyone was speaking English. And so like the uncles and her mom and dad and the aunts and things like that, they were sitting at the other table speaking in Vietnamese. And so, I
Yeah.
made the joke that I want to sit at the big kids table and speak Vietnamese.
Yeah. That's super cool though, man. Like
Yeah,
and honestly for you that's a cool thing too, like in terms of like because I presume it's probably a somewhat serious relationship if you're already going like visiting family and stuff like that.
yeah,
But what better way to show your interest um in her, but also it's like, because to them, I mean, you do love learning languages and stuff like that, and that's fine, but like to them, like that's like you're going out of your way to try and like show them that you're like good enough or something, you know what I mean? Like it's like that's like a little added thing, like, well, he is also learning Vietnamese, this dude's an all right guy.
yeah. And like I didn't want to tell her that I was like super into languages right away and wanted to learn Vietnamese because like I didn't want her to think that like I was just dating her because I really wanted to learn Vietnamese. So
Right.
like I waited a couple months and then like told her like I was interested in it, or maybe like tried to say a couple words, or like asked her how to say something. So I did it, like gradually, just so that it wouldn't like weird her
Yeah.
out, I think.
Right.
And so I think she's excited. She likes that I like, I'm learning it. And because I asked her, I was like, do you like that I'm doing this? I was like, is this okay? And she was like, yeah, yeah, it's good. And so she likes it.
Yeah. Now you said she moved here when she was young, right? Or was she
No,
born
yeah, so
here?
she was born here. Yeah, she was
Okay.
born in Pennsylvania.
Okay, never. I couldn't remember, and then I was thinking, I was like, well, I wonder how she learned, like how it was for her learning English. So I mean, she just grew up in a naturally, so she's probably naturally bilingual, right? Like she grew up speaking English and Vietnamese.
Yeah, I think, and I haven't actually like pinned down exactly the timeline on that, but she says that English is her second language, actually. So
Okay.
there must have been a significant amount of time as at least a young child where she spoke Vietnamese only, I guess, with her, at least with her mom and dad, and then maybe some other family members.
Okay.
She's the oldest of three girls.
Okay, gotcha. That's just kind of like Valeria from that I interviewed 2 nights ago, where she grew up in
Hmm.
she lived in Russia until she was 3 or 3.5. So that was all she had was Russian, and then when she moved here, so I guess English, and so I guess it's kind of like in that same thing where it's like the first little bit was just that one, and then English was still early enough to where you could still pick it up.
Hmm.
So what I was trying to think of anything that like, which I mean, we can talk about other things besides Vietnamese. But I like that's the thing. Like this is a cool show for me because like again I've never met. I think even when we chatted in about Esperanto, like one of the first times we met up, like I think I've even briefly went into like my love of Vietnamese and like the
Yeah.
people and stuff, man. Like so this is I love asking about Vietnam and stuff because again it's just a fascinating culture. So for Thanksgiving, I feel like some of the questions I'm going to ask are just absolutely stupid, and people are going to be like, "You're an idiot." How like what else would they do? But like, do they fix the typical standard American Thanksgiving, or do they have their own like Vietnamese little thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that that's a stupid question because I wondered the same thing. Um, so yeah, it was like for the most part a standard like American Thanksgiving dinner. There was like turkey and like green beans and like bread rolls and all that normal
Right.
Thanksgiving like dinner type stuff. There may have been like a couple, I guess, like Asian specific stuff. Like there was definitely rice. Like their
Sure.
mom had made like a pot of rice in the rice cooker. Um, and then maybe one or two other things. But yeah, for the most part, it was just like a standard American Thanksgiving dinner.
Nice. Okay. I don't know. I just wondered about that. Jumping back on language learning. Sorry, man. I'm trying to do it.
That's okay.
But with your so the way that you're studying Vietnamese, and honestly, maybe even the way that you studied Esperanto too. Do you ever look back on other languages that you studied and think like, man, I really wish I would have used the same method because of how much further I've went? Or do you think part of that is due to the interest in the language making it a little bit easier to learn?
Oh, geez. I mean, I don't know. For me, like making sure that I have like the right resource for the right language is really important. So it's hard like to look back at any of my like attempts at learning a language and like make comparisons to other languages because the way I went about it was so different.
Hmm.
Like for Esperanto, like the I guess I would say that I went from like very basic to fluent in the period of like 3 years. And so like for me, like it was Duolingo, going to NASC for the first time, dedicating like a whole year to like really reading and learning a lot about the history and like reading about the history in Esperanto and
Mm,
like just sort of immersing myself and like getting to know like all the history and some of the interesting parts about the language.
right.
That was like that was how I learned it. Then going back to NASC and having that second immersion experience, that's like very specific to Esperanto.
Right.
So I don't even know like to say like I want to do that for Vietnamese. Like I don't even know that that's possible, right?
Right.
Like I'm sure that it is, but I would probably have to like fly across the world to Vietnam
Right.
and like stay for a week, which it just isn't feasible right now.
Right.
And then to compare that to like the way that I learned a lot of my French was like through college courses. So like I'm not doing that right now. So it's just like it's hard to make any sort of like, I guess it's hard for me to like say like this is the way that I learn languages,
Right.
and it works for everyone because I've done it so many different ways.
Yeah, that's actually really critical. I think that a lot of people need to understand, myself included, obviously. But there is just because you learn a language with one method doesn't mean that that's the tried and true method. You can learn like not everything. Like I think, for example, anybody who knows me knows that I'm a massive fan of Link. I don't care for it for Japanese and stuff, and it's the way that they space the words. Um, and it's a hard language to do that with anyway because there are no spaces and they try to do you put the verb ending on there or do you just have the root? I don't know. Like there's whole other thing, and I definitely get that, but like there is definitely like some things work for one thing and not for others, and that's okay. Like just because you did well with this, I mean, I literally, that's what somebody asked in our chat. I think our chat last time. I think it was our chat last time. How far Duolingo could take you in Esperanto? I don't remember if that was in our chat or maybe a residual chat from a day or so later. But you know, Duolingo was the only thing I never used, like educado.net or anything like that. Like I think I did the first lesson, but I didn't really, I don't know, I just didn't stick with it.
Mhm.
So I mean, I literally learned a language from zero to conversational and being fine. Even though I would lose kind of a word here or there, I still was perfectly comfortable in my surrounding, specifically from Duolingo. That's not
Yeah.
going to happen in Japanese. So you know what I mean? Like it's, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that about Esperanto too. A lot of people would recommend Lernu, that website, and that was like one of the
That's
original ones, right? Oh, is
yeah,
that the one you were
that's
referring
the one
to?
I was referring to. What is educado.net? Is that another just?
Yeah, Educado is I think that's the online sort of like you get 10 free like almost Skype lessons with
That's yeah,
an
yeah,
experienced speaker.
that's
I
right.
never did any of that because I
Yeah,
felt like I mean I certainly could have benefited from it back in the day, but I felt like I had almost like progressed beyond like the need for it by the time I like really felt comfortable like I don't know, even considering doing it,
yeah,
which is really a testament, like we said, to how quickly you can make progress in the
yeah.
language. Um, so yeah, I don't know how we got back to Esperanto
Yeah,
again.
well, I was just saying. I was just saying, like, with the idea of like not using
Oh yeah,
one resource can get you one place, but not necessarily, because we do learn differently. And Glossica, you may have made strides with Vietnamese, and it may not have really set if you were trying to study something else. Like, just
hmm
for some reason our brains retain information in different
yeah.
ways.
Here's a good example. If we want to go down some more, I guess some exploration of that idea. Back in the day when I was doing French for college, I was sort of at it was after no. Maybe it was before my first ever like beginner French 101 class.
Hmm.
I had access to the French Pimsleur course.
Hmm.
And so I did, or maybe it was in between my 101 and 102. I can't remember exactly, but it was very early on. And I can remember that because the Pimsleur course for French I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I got through all of the first like French one, Pimsleur French one, and then had started working my way through the second course in the Pimsleur French.
Hmm.
And like I think what really helped me with that course was the pronunciation.
Yeah.
And so like hearing that and then repeating it back until I felt like I was saying, it exactly the way that they were saying it was really helpful to me. And so going into like my French courses, my professor had even commented a few times that I have good pronunciation, which, feels great, to hear from
Hmm.
someone who is a native in the language.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I had had some success with Pimsleur, and then ended up trying it for German for just a bit, and really was not getting anything out of it. So I think that's just another good example of like the differences between like it's the same resource, but it's two different
Yeah.
languages. And so for whatever reason, the German course just wasn't sticking with me like the French one was.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. I think Pimsleur is good. And I
Mhm.
agree. I've used it for. I did like almost the first two, so basically almost the first 60 lessons of Spanish. And then I used it. I used it for Russian, and I really liked it for Russian, and I really liked it for Greek. But which I finished like 15 lessons of Greek. But I didn't care much for the way that the Mandarin Chinese one was. So yeah, it's definitely, and that's what Marissa Longo said. It's interesting how many methods can change between languages. Yeah, it's very very even Mango languages is like I've done courses on Mango where I'm like this is really cool, and then I'll try it with something else, and it's just like I don't care. Like I don't care. Like it's really
Mhm.
weird.
Yeah, it is. It's super interesting, and I think and we know this. Everyone knows that like Lingo Deer is really good for Asian languages, whereas like Duolingo is not known at all for their like
Right.
Asian language courses. And I've tried. Goodness, at this point, I've certainly tried Vietnamese on Duolingo, um, a little bit of Korean, and then I don't think that they have Mandarin, do they?
Duolingo. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they do.
they do have it.
Yep.
Okay, but I've at least tried the Korean and the Vietnamese, and I don't care for either of those courses on Duolingo.
Yeah.
I haven't tried any of the like European languages on Lingo Deer. Have you had any experience with that?
I did. Well, no, not to where I could tell you if it was actually good. I tried the Spanish course, um, but I'm at a weird spot in Spanish where every time I start something and it's a beginner, I'm like, I don't care because I know like this is useless information to me. Like, so I didn't give it enough of a shot to really see how it was. One thing I did do was I turned my phone from not my phone. You can choose what your native language is on Lingodeer. I think you can on any app. And I turned it to Spanish to do probably Japanese or something like that. But it's hard to say if that really means anything because it's designed to I'm sure they have a team of people working on that. But yeah, I don't know how well. See, and I'm wondering how well it works for because right in the middle of Asian languages and Romance languages is kind of that Slavic area, and they do have Russian on there. So
Yeah, I guess that's a really big gap in sort of my like areas of study for languages anyways, is that I have really not spent any significant amount of time studying any Slavic language.
dude,
There was a very small, maybe like 2 week period where I studied Polish,
mhm.
and then maybe another 2 week period where I wanted to study Bosnian slash Croatian
Yeah,
slash Serbian.
right.
And so not much. I've never studied Russian or Ukrainian in any real capacity at all,
They're
which
amazing.
is kind of crazy for me. I don't know why. Like I just have never like I love the sound of the languages. I think that
Right.
they are like unique, and I think that they have like a really interesting culture and history. But just have never like wanted to really. It was
Yeah.
just like like I love all languages, and I think that they're all like super cool. But Slavic languages, I've just not given enough time, I think.
Right. No, I mean they're what it's one of my favorite trees, probably my favorite language tree, and I don't know why, but like I think it's just because of how like guttural and just like almost like
Mm-hmm.
dirty some of them sound. If that makes sense, like you know what I mean? Like they're very like gritty.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm really fascinated by that. I was also really fascinated by the way the verbs were when I was learning Russian. Like just as an example, like so the verbs to make it to make something. I'm trying to think if I think it was if it was past tense there was a certain verb tense that you used, and the only conjugation that you would change is whether or not it was if it was a male, you would use one conjugation, and if it was a female, you would use another conjugation
Mm-hmm.
to make it past. So it was like less conjugation. Like it was a very weird system, man. But it was like I kind of got used to it for the brief period I was studying Russian, and it made sense. I couldn't tell you now because that was a year ago, but it was a very weird system. And then of course I don't know if other Slavic languages are like that, but in Russian they don't use to be in the present tense. Like you just omit am all the time, or he is or she is. Like you just don't say it. Like it's
Huh,
very
interesting.
weird.
Yeah, the thought, like, I guess, and this is probably because the past, I guess, the most recent languages I've dedicated any real amount of time to has been Vietnamese and Esperanto. And so, like, the thought of, like, having, like, complicated verbs
Yeah.
again, like, for language learning just sounds like a miserable time. So, like, there for a while, I had thought about, like, trying to get back into some Spanish. And it was just, I don't know, like looking at all the verb endings and then trying to remember like AR verbs and IR verbs,
Yeah.
and I was just like, I'm not ready for it yet. Like
Yeah.
I'm ready to keep my simple verbs, my simple verb tenses and my simple conjugations.
Yep.
So
Vietnamese
maybe
language for
maybe
you.
someday.
Vietnamese is the language for you. You should learn.
Yeah.
So if you're narrowing it down to Nix's Polish has it too. The is that the to be thing I'm talking about, or maybe the way the verbs conjugate? Um,
I have no memory of any Polish. I can say Nastrovia.
I can say dobranoc, which is
I
like
don't know.
a good night.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think mine is cheers.
yeah. Um, you could learn. So if verb conjugations aren't your thing, you could learn. You could learn Afrikaans, all their verbs are the same. You could learn Swedish. You could learn Norwegian. You could learn. I'm not sure about Danish. I think is Danish the other Scandinavian language. Swedish, Danish. I think Danish is the other. Anyway.
Yeah, that sounds right. It's
yeah,
right there around them.
Yeah. You could learn. I think Mandarin. You could learn. Yeah, obviously Vietnamese. There's a lot more languages that don't do verb conjugations than I thought.
Oh, sure.
And if you want to get technical, you could do like Vietnamese or Japanese and Korean because they do conjugate, but it's only for tense, not for pronoun.
Okay.
So even though that still is a conjugation, of course, again the problem is you got 30 different ways to conjugate a present tense verb because of the subtlety and formality you're trying to express, but that's a whole different thing. So yeah, I actually got obsessed with because like I've always thought like I can nail down any grammar point, right? Like I can get whatever, like I can figure out how a sentence is structured, I can do whatever I need to do. I just hate conjugating verbs. And so there for a while I was like, I think I'm just gonna learn, I think all the languages I learn, I'm just gonna say screw verbs, and I'm just gonna learn languages that don't have verb conjugate, or the traditional like he is, they are, like the one conjugation. But I did not do that. So
I mean, I think it's fair enough, and probably a lot of that comes from the fact that, like, I think you mentioned this too, like high school Spanish, right?
yeah,
Like it was all about like look at this chart and memorize like these endings that go with this pronoun. And I think that probably for a lot of Americans and maybe English speakers in general, like that was how you learned languages. You looked at the charts and you memorized them, and then you plugged them in on a test or whatever.
yeah,
And so like that I think has sort of like created this like sense of avoid, like keep that away from me in language learning, right?
yep,
So maybe I don't know, we're just going to solve all of the world language learning problems with saying like maybe don't approach it like that if you are like just trying to like learn Spanish or French or any of the other probably Romance languages for sure.
yep. Well, I was literally just now thinking while you were saying that there's verbs that are useless to learn some conjugations, right? How often in your life, right? And I know that it's probably been once because you've probably been expressing yourself as a representative of a group. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. But like, why would you ever learn outside of if you heard it in a conversation, you absolutely had to know it. Why would you ever learn the conjugation for like for example, said or to say, which is like decir in Spanish, is a irregular verb. Why would you learn how to say we say? Outside of if you were like a parent, like, well, here's what we are saying. But like, why would you learn that? Even as having a 3.5-year-old, I've said that less than 10 times in my life.
Right.
So why?
Yeah, I mean,
so why
that's a
would you
good
learn
point.
that? I think
Right.
that
So
is that it. Decir, is that the same?
I've no idea.
Spanish dict. Decir. All right. It's telling me to turn off my ad blocker. Decir. Yeah, to say or tell. Not, yeah. Decir. Conjugation. Preterite. Yeah, so we would be dijimos. Okay. It's not too crazy. You just add a J. It changes from it's a little bit different. But still, like, the point is, like, if you're taking time to learn, like, irregular verbs, why would you learn something like that? Nick says that's how we learn English as well. We have to memorize the whole table of irregular verbs. Yeah, that's irregular verbs are stupid. What's stupid about irregular verbs are they're the most used verbs.
Right. Yeah. Especially in English. I mean, I guess like to be right in English is changing for pretty much every pronoun.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like I guess it's one of those like necessary evils, and for some people maybe it does work. Like I was talking about the correlative chart in Esperanto. For me, like looking at that chart and being able to like look at the direction this way and then look at the direction this way
Yeah.
and to see the word that I needed to use, that was really helpful.
Yeah.
So maybe again, it's like different. Like it's the same like way of thinking, but for different languages.
Yeah,
So like for me, charts in Esperanto really worked, but charts in like high school Spanish didn't
didn't
work at
work.
all.
Yeah, and I can agree with that. Well, plus too the I really like that correlative chart because like it even had like if it was like K or C, it was like question word or involves everyone or like it
Mhm.
had like the little like almost like cheat sheet kind of mentality
Right.
uh, to it as well, which I really liked. Let's see. It is 10:17. I'm going to start wrapping up a little bit. If anybody watching has any questions, let me know. So your plans, your goals for the future are Vietnamese. That's pretty much it for the foreseeable-ish future.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. Right now, it really is my only focus. Of course, there are times where I think, oh, I'll just go back to French real quick for a refresher, but I'm not going to do that. I'm sticking with Vietnamese. I might do something, pretty crazy, like you, and delete all the language learning apps off of my phone so that I'm not tempted in any way.
Dude,
Put away
that's been
all
the
my like other
best.
books and things.
Yeah, that's been the absolute best, man, and that's why I've been. I mean, today is the end of three. I guess the end of 3 weeks. It's 21 days. I started April 1st, and like not having the constant Duolingo pop up of all the languages
Yeah.
that I've done, like it's just really helped me stay focused. Which I'm gonna make a 1 month video at the beginning of April. I'm doing a monthly Skype call with Matt to kind of just gauge where I'm at in terms of immersion. And I'm not and I'm probably not following the MA Bible the way, I'm making it work for me.
Sure.
But just in terms of where I'm at, what I need to do. So I'll probably make an update kind of the first a little bit after that. But, just a small little preview of what that's probably going to be is I'm probably not advancing as fast as I need to, but it's not necessarily that as much as that's exactly the point. I'm soaking all this information in. This is a long-term thing, and every video I watch, like once people hit about 3 or 6 months into like mass immersion, it's almost like everybody has the same thing. They're like, it kind of just clicked. Like you were talking about with Glossica, it was like
Mhm.
it kind of like I've read people who after doing 6 months of immersion have made, the monolingual transition where they if they find a word they don't know, they look it up in the target language after 6 months
Oh,
of
wow.
immersion. Like so, which I know a lot of that. Everybody's different, and I'm not comparing myself to them because I'm not. I don't have enough time. I don't immerse as much as the next person because I have a job. I work 8 to 5. I do have passive immersion on, but in terms of active, I have a son, and that's one thing that I've really decided this time is like I will immerse sometimes when he's awake. Like if I've had a rough day at work or something, and like trying to get stuff like I'll be like, let me just watch like this 20-minute YouTube video or something. But
Mhm.
other than that, like he is my 100% focus when I get off work to the time he gets to bed. So I usually don't even start immersing until around 10 or so at night. I'm getting about 2 hours a day, and I know a lot of these people are getting 4, 5, 6 hours a day. So I know I'm not going to be
Sure.
that fast, but just being submersed in the and it's just like I was talking about earlier, the idea of comprehensible input, right? Everybody's like, it has to be
Mhm.
comprehensible. And I'm like, but if everything is comprehensible, I know the language.
Right.
Like that's the point. I have to like I think that there's a lost and I said this as a matter of fact, I have a video on this channel, right? It's one of the really early videos that I made solving a Rubik's cube, how I was talking about it being layers of language learning and the like the
Mhm.
most important layer was the listening. So I said this before immersion.
Yeah.
So this is not a new approach. This is not like me drinking the Kool-Aid. Listening, look, just because you don't understand it, right? You have to learn how the language sounds
Sure. Yeah,
because
100% agree.
you have to learn the way the language sounds, especially if it's that different from English. If you go to a Spanish
Mhm.
speaking country, I guarantee you're still not going to pick up 80% of what they say if you don't like.
Yeah.
You have to learn how the language sounds. So
Right.
I still have people. I've had people been like, if you don't understand it, it's useless, and I'm like, man, but I've seen a lot of evidence that proves otherwise.
Well, there's melody, right, to language. It's
Yeah.
almost like it's I mean Spanish in at least in like South America and Mexico and south of the United States. I mean, they are firing off words at like, I mean, 100 words a minute. It seems
Yeah,
like,
just
or however fast it might be. And so like, if you can't like, if your brain isn't like picking up that rhythm and like starting to like recognize almost patterns in like the intonation, the ups and the downs, and you know, sort of like the sounds that they're making. I think that it's hard to even try to speak because you
yeah,
don't have anything to like to try to replicate.
yeah,
And so like listening to like Julie's parent, my girlfriend's name is Julie. So listen to her parents speak. It's like it sounds like they are speaking so quickly. And I'm thinking like, is that the way everyone, you know, speaking Vietnamese is going to be speaking? And so far, like that's like trying to like pick out a word or two, like whenever I hear them speak or whenever I hear someone during these lessons during like the role play speak, because they're speaking really quickly as well.
yeah,
And so like just getting used to like that, like you know when they're taking breaths almost
yeah.
too, like the gaps in the sentences and like the spacing between the words is like really helpful, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. And well, see, and the thing is, and my whole thing with it is, as I learn how the language sounds, so like right now, I would say it depends on the context in terms of video, like because there are some YouTubers that are just insanely hyper that just. But like if I'm watching like a TV show, if I'm watching an anime, or if I'm watching like Terrace House on Netflix or something, I can understand. And when I say understand, I don't mean comprehend. I mean I can physically. I know the start and stop of each word, and I can pull out any word I want to
Mhm.
look up. I would say about 40% of the time, and that's just after training. You know, which again I've listened. I always say this: don't compare yourself to me. I've off and on studied Japanese for 11 years, but that's after 30 hours of hardcore active immersion.
Mhm.
And sometimes a lot of it still runs together, you know, over half of it. But I can tell my listening is better because when I hear it spoken, it sounds like me and you talking right now in terms of I know where each word starts and stops.
Sure.
And the point of that is when you get to that point, you can pick the word out and you can then look it up. Like
Mhm.
if you can't recognize where the sounds start and stop, how do you know what you're trying to look up?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's always sort of like we have this saying in a lot of the work that I do. You don't know what you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's almost like you're getting to that point to where like you can start to know because you can distinguish what you don't know out of the sentence.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that I mean to me it makes sense. I don't know the science behind it or anything, but I think that you know as a method to learn a language, I think it's a
Yeah.
valid way to do it.
Well, and the other thing that I kept thinking about was, for example, in English, right? If someone says a word that you don't know, and you're like, what is that? And they tell you what it is, you pretty much know it. And it's because you're familiar with the language.
Mhm.
You're familiar with the sound. So, like, being familiar with the sounds, even again, if you don't fully understand what those sounds are meaning, you're still familiar with the sounds to where it's easier for that word to stick. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, 100% agree. You know, I mean, I keep thinking back to like, you don't know what you don't know. That really is a perfect way, I think, in my head to conceptualize it.
Yeah.
Is like, because it does like, there is like this overwhelming feeling of like hearing people when you're just starting out learning a language.
Yeah.
It does all run together and you can't like, you don't know where one word starts and one stops. And so I think like making the distinction between individual words or pieces, you know, phrases, anyways, and then identifying that and then writing it down and looking it up. I think that
Yeah.
works. I think it's good.
I remember, man. I can like I don't know what like adjective I'm trying to use here. Adjective. I don't even know if that's the right word. That's how much English grammar I know. But like I can like physically remember. Like I can vividly remember the exact time I listened to like purposefully listened to Japanese for the first time in 2009 when I was like I'm gonna learn Japanese. I can remember listening and I remember thinking to myself, they didn't breathe. Like
Right.
I remember that feeling, and like I try to put in perspective now. Like if I could tell myself, and again, I don't speak the language, I'm not good, I don't understand, but like in terms of being able to hear the individual sounds, if I could tell myself then, dude, just keep listening and you're going to get like my brain. It's actually really weird because now sometimes I will almost try to see if I can make it sound like I'll try to like almost phase it out enough to where it sounds like it originally did, where it's just this jumble. And like I can't not hear it now, which is really weird.
Right. You know, it's funny because like I haven't even thought about this, but I watch quite a bit of anime, and
Hmm.
so like growing up, I was of course into like Dragon Ball Z and like Pokemon, but that was all in English, you know,
Right.
with the dubs. But you know, relatively recently, over the past 8 or 9 years, like been watching a lot of like the original like Japanese language with English subtitles,
Hmm.
and so like I'd watch My Hero Academia, and I watched Naruto back in back in the day, and have started Boruto. I haven't gotten quite far into that, but like after you do hear it so many times, like I know it's like crazy exaggerated the way that they're speaking, probably, but you can like you hear a word so many times in an anime that like, and you see the subtitle and you learn like that what that word is,
Yeah.
which is like that proves your point. And I hadn't even realized that like I've done that before with
Yeah.
Japanese even.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's the always go to the Nagadu and Hayaru references for me. Where I was watching that
Yeah.
Mario Maker video, and she was like Nagadu, 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 and I was like, all right, that clearly means throw. I don't even like. I'm gonna look it up just to make sure, but like, it's just stuck, you know. Like
Mhm.
it's and then there was another phrase that I learned, which is like it's kind of like if you're saying like I'm wondering, like if you put kana at the end of a sentence, it means that you're like wondering.
Mhm.
And this girl was like, she's like Matakana, and I just learned like what, and Mata is used for like still or yet or even or that kind of word. So like,
Mhm.
and I guess again it's up to interpretation. And if I would understand more of the context of what she said before, I'd probably know an exact meaning. But I took it as kind of like like basically I'm wondering, or I still wonder maybe perhaps about whatever previous statement she made.
Mhm.
But yeah, man, it's I think that it's a good thing. But I also will say, because I know somebody out there, if they watch this for an hour and however long we've been going, somebody's going to be like, "You're just drinking the Matt versus Japan Kool-Aid." Look, I'm fully in agreement that you may not learn a language that way. That's perfectly fine. I'm not saying this is the way to do it, okay? Just to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I know Matt versus Japan only through your channel. I've never watched any of the videos. And I mean, I just realized I've been doing the immersion with anime for years and years.
Without
So,
even thinking
I mean,
about it.
yeah, without even realizing that I've been doing it. So that should be like the ultimate
Yeah.
like testament to the
Yeah.
system, to the method.
Yeah, which he's added a lot of stuff. Like on his Discord, he actually has separate channels now for Chinese, like Mandarin. I don't know if Cantonese is on there yet, but I know Mandarin is. I know he has one for Spanish. I think Korean. So I mean, it's because it's a concept. It's not. He's not first and foremost. He's not selling anybody anything. You can still
Right.
access all of his like he does Q&As for his Patreon people just as like a bonus for being Patreons, and you have his Discord server. But like whether you have ever given him $1 or not, you can access the MIA add-on for Anki. You can go to YouTube, watch him show a video how to use it. So it's like it's not even he's not even selling you anything. If you want to donate money to him, you can. I don't know. That's a whole different topic. People give Matt a
Sure.
hard time, and I've said this for a long time. I've said this before I started MIA, and I said this before I started MIA before I started MIA the first time. Like when I was like, I'm totally gonna do this, and then totally didn't. But like, it's got to be frustrating for him being proficient and like one of the most proficient speakers out there of Japanese to constantly be crapped on by the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Like, which maybe he's not, maybe he doesn't care. I'm sure he doesn't to an extent, but like, wouldn't it suck to be real? And I guess you don't really do it because you want to be looked at as someone who's good, but it's like he's not trying to sell you a book on how to get, quote unquote, get rich quick. He's giving you free concept of how he did it, and people are like, nope, you're an idiot, that can't work, that's impossible. And he's like, okay. Like, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's right. And I can't speak to it any more than what I just said, but I think that like you know, if that is what worked for him, there's a really high chance that it's going to work for someone else.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about like not every resource is going to work for every person, but like you said, he's not trying to get you to buy something.
Yeah.
That was his method that he found, and
Yeah.
he wants to share it. So,
Yeah, you can
you
access
know,
the entire. If you go to massimmersionapproach.com, you can literally access the entire what they've wrote,
mhm.
and it's there for you. So, cool. Well, hey, I'm going to end that. Wrap that. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Anything that you wanted to question, ask, bring up, talk about, chat, whatever?
No, no, I think it was a good chat. We certainly got off topic a few
Yeah.
times, but I think we were bound to do that because we talked for a good long time last week.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna stick with Vietnamese, and I'm hoping that you'll keep up the work with the podcast. I'm like putting them in like on my phone while I'm in the shower and like listening to them to like wind down for the evening, and then like while I'm cooking and stuff. So tuning in live when I can. Oftentimes I'm not on the live chat, but certainly listening like while I'm like making food for dinner or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So I'm appreciating it, and I'm finding them motivating too. Like I told you earlier today, I was like, you know, that conversation that we had really got me like thinking like stop wasting your time. Like you want to learn Vietnamese, get back into it. And
Right.
so I don't know. I think it was motivational for me at least.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that you say that because I think a lot of that is maybe part of what has kept me honest with Japanese is constantly relating others' experiences to my Japanese. Like it's
Mm.
maybe it's helped kind of put that in perspective, right? Like, and
Yeah.
it could have had the opposite toll. It definitely, like, especially being as like jumpy as I am, I definitely could have been like, oh, this person's talking about this language, maybe I should. But like I think
Right.
hearing other people's passions about that has made me maybe stay a little more honest with Japanese because I'm like, I have that passion.
Yeah, for sure.
So
You know, I think I just you just gave me sort of an idea. Maybe, you know, once you've interviewed this never-ending list of people who want to be on the podcast, maybe you start doing language-specific ones and almost set it up sort of like a panel. Maybe, you know, have two or three people come on and chat about Spanish, and then, you know, two or three more different people
yeah,
come on and talk about Japanese or whatever it might be. So
yeah,
I don't know. Just a
nah,
thought.
man,
I would definitely tune in for that.
yeah.
For all of those. That would
We'll
be super cool.
we'll see where it goes. It's been a really cool experience so far. That is for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna end the stream here. Thanks everybody for watching. Um, hopefully you all enjoyed. I will be back Thursday night. I have Aaron from Fingtam Languages, which is kind of a
Nice.
myth of the of the podcast because I didn't mention him on this episode until just now. So this is my Aaron. This is my Aaron mention for the day. But yeah, I will be back Thursday night, 9 p.m. ish. Eastern Standard Time, New York time, if that makes it easier for you to find. So yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'm stalling for time because I forgot I'm not on my live stream window to where I can hit end stream. There we go. And I will see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching. Go check out Kyle. His stuff is in the description.